The attic air hung thick and still, a suffocating blanket woven from dust motes dancing in the scant light filtering through a grimy window. Liam coughed, waving a hand in front of his face, the scent of decay and forgotten things clinging to the back of his throat. He'd been tasked with clearing out his recently deceased grandmother's house, a task that felt less like honoring her memory and more like excavating a tomb. He'd always felt a strange disconnect with this house, a coldness that permeated the very walls, despite his grandmother's otherwise warm and loving nature. Now, alone amidst the silent remnants of her life, that feeling intensified, a prickle of unease crawling up his spine. He'd been working his way through boxes filled with moth-eaten clothes, yellowed photographs, and trinkets whose significance had long since faded. It was in a dark corner, tucked beneath a pile of old blankets smelling faintly of lavender and something else. Something metallic and unsettling, that he found it. A small, leather-bound diary, its cover worn smooth with age, the clasp long broken. It looked insignificant, easily overlooked, yet something about it drew Liam in. Felt different. He picked it up, the leather surprisingly soft against his fingertips. There was no name on the cover, no indication of who it belonged to. Back downstairs, in the relative cleanliness of the living room, Liam settled into his grandmother's old armchair, the diary resting heavy in his lap. He ran a finger over the faded stitching, a sense of anticipation mixed with a strange foreboding settling over him. He opened it. The first entry was dated June 12, 1987. The handwriting was childish, slightly uneven but legible. June 12, 1987. Today was my birthday. I turned 8. Mom made my favorite chocolate cake with blue icing. Dad gave me a new set of Lego, the space shuttle one. It was really cool. We had a party with all my friends. Michael gave me a comic book and Sarah gave me a drawing of a unicorn. It was the best day ever. Liam smiled faintly. It was just a normal entry, the innocent musings of a child. He flipped through the pages. The early entries continued in the same vein. School events, playing with friends, family outings. They painted a picture of a happy, ordinary childhood. But as he delved deeper, the tone began to subtly shift. The entries became shorter, more introspective. There were mentions of feeling tired, of having strange dreams. July 28, 1987. I had a bad dream last night. There was a tall, shadowy man standing in the corner of my room. He didn't move or say anything, but I could feel him watching me. It felt cold, like when you open the fridge door. I woke up feeling really scared. Liam frowned. It was just a nightmare, he told himself. Kids have nightmares all the time. He continued reading. August 5, 1987. Sometimes when I'm alone in my room I hear things. Like someone whispering my name. But when I ask Mom or Dad if they said anything, they say no. Maybe it's just the house making noises. It's an old house. The house. Liam looked around the living room at the familiar cracks in the walls, the way the old floorboards creaked under his weight. This house had always felt old, but he'd never heard whispers. The entries grew increasingly unsettling. The boy, whose name Liam still didn't know, started describing more vivid and disturbing occurrences. August 19, 1987. There are shadows in my room at night even when the lights are off. They move like they're alive. I try to tell myself it's just my imagination, but they feel so real. Sometimes I see them just at the edge of my vision, like they're hiding. September 3, 1987. I saw the man again last night. He was outside my window, just standing there in the dark. I couldn't see his face, but I knew it was him. I pulled the covers over my head and pretended to be asleep until the sun came up. A chill snaked down Liam's spine. This was no longer just a child's diary. There was a palpable sense of fear and dread creeping into the writing. September 15, 1987. Something is wrong. I can feel it. It's like there's a dark cloud hanging over me all the time. I don't feel safe anymore, even in my own room. I keep looking over my shoulder, but there's never anyone there. Except, sometimes I catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. Liam's heart began to pound in his chest. He felt a growing unease, a sense that he was treading on forbidden ground. He wanted to stop reading, to put the diary down and forget he'd ever found it. But a morbid curiosity, a dark fascination, kept him turning the pages. The entries started to mention a feeling, a certainty, that something was coming for him. October 1, 1987. I know I'm going to die. I don't know when or how, but I know it's going to happen. This feeling is always with me now, a cold weight in my stomach. I try to tell Mom and Dad, but they just say I'm being silly. They say I'm just scared of the dark. October 12, 1987. The whispers are louder now. They call my name over and over. They sound like they're coming from inside the walls. I try to block them out, but they're always there, just beneath the surface of everything. Liam's hands trembled as he held the diary. The child's fear was so raw, so visceral, it felt like a physical presence in the room. He looked around, half expecting to see shadows moving in the corners, to hear faint whispers on the wind. The last entry was dated October 28, 1987. October 28, 1987. It's here. I can feel it. It's getting closer. I saw it in my room tonight. It wasn't just a shadow. It was something else. Something dark and cold. It reached for me. I screamed, but no one came. I don't think anyone can hear me anymore. I'm so scared. I don't want to die. The entry ended abruptly mid-sentence. The next few pages were blank. Liam closed the diary, his mind reeling. The date of the last entry? October 28, 1987. His grandmother had told him that a young boy had died in this house many years ago. He'd fallen down the stairs, she'd said. A tragic accident. But the diary painted a very different picture. Liam couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stumbled upon something terrible, something that had been deliberately forgotten. The diary felt like a cry for help, a desperate warning that had gone unheard. He needed to know more. He needed to know who this child was, what had really happened to him. He started by asking his parents about the boy who had died in the house. They were hesitant at first, their faces clouding over with a strange mixture of sadness and discomfort. It was a long time ago, Liam, his mother said, her voice soft. A very sad thing. What was his name? Liam asked. His parents exchanged a look. His name was Thomas, his father finally said, his gaze avoiding Liam's. Thomas Ashton. Liam felt a jolt. Ashton. That was his grandmother's maiden name. Thomas Ashton was her nephew. He pressed them for more details, but they were reluctant to talk about it. They said it had been a difficult time for the family, a tragedy they had all tried to move on from. They insisted it was just a terrible accident. But Liam couldn't reconcile their explanation with the chilling entries in the diary. The fear, the certainty of death, it didn't sound like a child who was simply going to trip and fall. He decided to talk to some of the older neighbors, people who might remember the Ashtons and the tragedy that had befallen them. The first few people he spoke to were polite but evasive. They remembered the Ashtons, of course, but when Liam mentioned Thomas, their expressions would shift, their eyes darting away. They would offer vague condolences and quickly end the conversation. It was like there was an unspoken agreement, a wall of silence surrounding the memory of Thomas Ashton. Finally, he found an elderly woman, Mrs. Henderson, who had lived next door to his grandmother for decades. She was frail and her memory wasn't what it used to be, but when Liam mentioned Thomas's name, a flicker of something, fear? Sadness? Crossed her face. Little Thomas, she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. Such a sweet boy. I found his diary, Liam said, his voice low. He wrote about strange things happening to him before he died. Shadows, whispers. Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. The whispers, she repeated, her voice trembling. He told me about the whispers. I didn't believe him. Liam felt a surge of hope mixed with a sickening dread. What else did he tell you? Mrs. Henderson looked around nervously, as if afraid someone might overhear them. He said there was something in the house. Something dark. It was watching him. It wanted him. Liam's blood ran cold. This corroborated the diary entries, the child's growing terror. Did he say what it was? Liam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Henderson shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. No, he was just so scared. His parents, they didn't know what to do. They thought he was just having nightmares, that he had an overactive imagination. And then he died, Liam said, the words heavy with unspoken meaning. Mrs. Henderson nodded slowly. They said he fell down the stairs. But I always wondered. Her voice trailed off, her gaze distant and troubled. Liam felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture far more sinister than a simple accident. As Liam continued to delve into the mystery of Thomas Ashton, strange things started happening to him. Subtle at first, easily dismissed as his imagination playing tricks on him, fueled by the disturbing content of the diary. He started hearing faint whispers when he was alone in the house. Just at the edge of his hearing, like someone was calling his name from another room. When he went to investigate, there was never anyone there. He began to notice shadows in the periphery of his vision, fleeting movements that vanished when he turned to look directly at them. Sometimes, he would catch a glimpse of something dark and indistinct in the corners of his eyes, only for it to disappear into the gloom. He found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, a feeling of being watched settling over him. It was the same feeling Thomas had described in his diary. The parallels were becoming too strong to ignore. Liam felt a growing unease, a sense that he was somehow stepping into the same nightmare that had consumed the young boy. He became obsessed with the diary, rereading the entries over and over, searching for clues, for some explanation for the terrifying events that had plagued Thomas's final months. He felt a desperate need to understand what had happened, as if by unraveling the mystery of the past, he could somehow protect himself in the present. Sleep became a luxury. When he did manage to drift off, his dreams were filled with shadowy figures, whispering voices, and a pervasive sense of cold dread. He would wake up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding, the lingering echoes of the nightmare clinging to him. He tried to talk to his parents about what he was experiencing, but they dismissed his concerns, attributing them to stress and an overactive imagination. "You're just tired, Liam," his mother said, patting his hand. "This whole house-clearing thing is getting to you." But Liam knew it wasn't just stress. He could feel it, the same chilling presence that Thomas had described. It was subtle, insidious, but it was there. One evening, as he was reading the diary in Thomas's old room, a room his grandmother had kept locked and untouched for years, he noticed something new. A small, almost imperceptible scratch on the wooden floorboards near the window. He hadn't seen it before. He ran his fingers over it. It looked fresh. Had someone been in this room recently? But who? And why? He felt a prickle of fear. Was he truly alone in this house? He started to feel like he was being followed even outside the house. He would catch glimpses of a figure in his peripheral vision, a tall, dark shape that would disappear before he could get a clear look. He tried to rationalize it, to tell himself it was just his mind playing tricks on him. But the feeling of being watched, of being hunted, was too real, too persistent. He remembered Thomas's entry about seeing the shadowy man outside his window. A wave of cold dread washed over him. Liam knew he had to dig deeper to uncover the truth behind Thomas's death, no matter how disturbing it might be. He felt a responsibility to the boy, a sense that he owed him the truth after all these years of silence. He started looking through old family photographs, hoping to find a picture of Thomas. He found one eventually, tucked away in a dusty photo album. A smiling, bright-eyed boy around 8 years old holding a Lego space shuttle. The same one mentioned in the first diary entry. Looking at the innocent face, Liam felt a pang of sadness and a renewed determination to find out what had truly happened to him. He decided to visit the local library, hoping to find some record of Thomas's death. He searched through old newspapers, birth and death certificates, anything that might shed some light on the tragedy. He found it in a small article in the local newspaper from October 1987. Local boy dies in stairwell accident. The article briefly described the death of 8-year-old Thomas Ashton, who had reportedly fallen down the stairs at his home. It mentioned the grief of his parents and his aunt, Liam's grandmother. It seemed straightforward enough, confirming the official story. But Liam couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it, that the diary held a truth that the newspaper article had glossed over. He went back to Mrs. Henderson, hoping she might remember something else, some detail she had forgotten to mention. This time she seemed more willing to talk, her initial fear replaced by a weary resignation. "They said it was an accident," she repeated, her voice flat. "But Thomas was always so careful. He never ran on the stairs. And he was so scared in those last few weeks. He wouldn't even go downstairs by himself." Liam's heart skipped a beat. This contradicted the official story. Did he ever say what he was scared of? Liam asked. Mrs. Henderson hesitated, her eyes darting around the room again. He said it was something that lived in the walls. Something that whispered his name and watched him from the shadows. He said it wanted to take him away. Liam felt a chill crawl up his spine. The diary entries echoed Mrs. Henderson's words with terrifying accuracy. Did anyone else believe him? Liam asked. His parents? My grandmother? Mrs. Henderson shook her head sadly. They tried to help him, of course. They took him to doctors, but they said he was just a sensitive child with a vivid imagination. They didn't understand. And then he died, Liam said again, the words hanging heavy in the air. Mrs. Henderson nodded. After it happened, his parents were never the same. They moved away not long after. Your grandmother, she stayed here, but she never talked about Thomas. It was like he never existed. Liam felt a wave of understanding wash over him. The silence, the discomfort when Thomas's name was mentioned, it wasn't just grief, it was fear. Fear of something they couldn't explain, something they didn't want to acknowledge. As Liam was leaving Mrs. Henderson's house, she stopped him at the door, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. "Be careful, Liam," she said, her voice trembling. Some things are best left undisturbed." Her words sent a shiver down his spine. Was he in danger? Was he getting too close to something he shouldn't? Back in his grandmother's house, Liam felt a growing sense of dread. The atmosphere in the house had shifted. The whispers were more frequent now, the shadows more defined. He could feel a cold presence in the air, a palpable sense of something watching him. He went back to Thomas's room, the diary clutched tightly in his hand. He reread the last entry, the child's desperate plea for help, his terror as the unseen presence reached for him. He looked around the room, his gaze lingering on the window. The same window Thomas had seen the shadowy man outside of. He walked over to it, his heart pounding in his chest. As he looked out into the darkness, he saw it. A tall, gaunt figure standing at the edge of the garden, its form indistinct in the gloom. It was watching the house, watching him. Liam recoiled in terror, stumbling backward. He had seen it. The same figure Thomas had described. It wasn't his imagination. It was real. He felt a cold dread wash over him. The same thing that had haunted Thomas was now haunting him. He knew with a chilling certainty that he was in danger. He had opened a door to something dark and malevolent, something that had been lying dormant for years, waiting to be awakened. He remembered Mrs. Henderson's warning. Some things are best left undisturbed. He had disturbed it. He had read the diary, delved into the past, and now the past had come back to claim him. He looked down at the diary in his hands. Was this it? Was this the key? Had Thomas somehow trapped this entity within the pages of his diary, hoping that someone would one day find it and understand? Or was the act of reading it the trigger, the invitation that had allowed it to return? He felt a sudden urge to destroy the diary, to burn it, to tear it into a million pieces. But something held him back. He felt a strange connection to Thomas, a sense of shared terror. He couldn't just erase his story, his warning. He spent the rest of the night in a state of terrified vigilance, every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside the window sending shivers down his spine. The whispers were constant now, a chorus of voices just below the threshold of hearing, calling his name. As dawn approached, casting a pale light through the windows, Liam knew he couldn't stay in the house any longer. He had to get out to escape the suffocating presence that was closing in on him. He packed a bag, throwing in the diary, his hands shaking so badly he could barely close the clasp. He had to take it with him. He didn't know why, but he felt like it was the only link he had to understanding what was happening. As he reached the front door, he heard a sound from upstairs. A slow, deliberate creaking on the stairs. The same stairs Thomas had supposedly fallen down. Liam froze, his blood turning to ice. He wasn't alone in the house. He could hear the footsteps getting closer, each creak echoing in the silent house like a death knell. He backed away from the door, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked around frantically, searching for a way out. The windows were old and stiff, likely painted shut. The footsteps reached the landing outside the living room. Liam held his breath, every muscle in his body tense. A shadow fell across the doorway. A tall, gaunt figure, its form still indistinct in the dim light. But this time, Liam could sense its presence, a cold, malevolent energy that filled the room. It took a step into the living room. Liam could now make out some of its features. Long, skeletal fingers, a hunched posture, and a head that seemed to be tilted at an unnatural angle. He still couldn't see its face, but he could feel its gaze, cold and empty, fixed on him. A whisper, chilling and raspy, filled the air. Liam? Liam's blood ran cold. He knew his name. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. He was paralyzed with fear, trapped in the same nightmare that had consumed Thomas. The figure took another step closer, its long, skeletal hand reaching out towards him. Liam closed his eyes, bracing for the inevitable. But then he remembered the diary. He fumbled with his bag, pulling it out, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He opened it to the last entry, the one where Thomas described the figure reaching for him. He held the diary out in front of him like a shield. The figure hesitated, its outstretched hand faltering. It seemed to recoil slightly, as if burned by an invisible flame. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of voices swirling around Liam, but they no longer sounded like they were calling his name. They sounded angry. Liam didn't understand what was happening, but he knew he had to do something. He started reading the last entry aloud, his voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with each word. It's here. I can feel it. It's getting closer. I saw it in my room tonight. It wasn't just a shadow. It was something else. something dark and cold. It reached for me. I screamed, but no one came. I don't think anyone can hear me anymore. I'm so scared. I don't want to die. As he finished the last word, the figure let out a guttural shriek, a sound that seemed to tear through the very fabric of reality. It stumbled backward, its form flickering like a dying flame. Then, with a final, agonizing wail, it vanished. The whispers ceased. The cold presence in the room dissipated. The house was silent once more. Liam stood there, trembling, the diary still clutched in his hand. He didn't know what had just happened, but he knew he had survived. He looked down at the diary, at the childish handwriting that had chronicled a descent into terror. Thomas hadn't just recorded his fear. He had somehow captured the very thing that had haunted him within these pages. Liam knew he couldn't stay in this house. It was tainted, forever marked by the darkness that had resided within its walls. He had to leave, to try and put some distance between himself and the terrifying entity he had encountered. But as he walked out the front door, the diary still in his hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still being watched. He glanced back at the house, a cold dread settling in his heart. He had escaped this time. But he knew, with a chilling certainty, that whatever had haunted Thomas Ashton, whatever had almost claimed him, was still out there. And now it knew his name. He was no longer just reading the diary of a kid who knew he would die. He was living the aftermath. The haunting had just begun. And he had a terrible feeling that the final entry was yet to be written. Not by Thomas, but by him.